Is it Olu?
Oh, yes, Olu.
All right, Olu, you're on Talk Heathen with Jamie and Noah. What did you want to talk about today?
Hi, Jamie and Noah. It's finally awesome to talk to you guys. Yeah, I finally said I was going to call 2019, so that's off my bucket list. So you guys are doing a great job.
The rest of the year's just downhill from here, huh?
Yeah. I was going to say, based on your topic, you should call Matt as well.
Yes, I actually have to call Matt. You know, I've been listening to you guys for a while, and I'm like, sometimes I call, I drop the phone, I'm like, you know what, this is 2019. Maybe this is one of the New Year's resolution I have to do. Just call Talk Heathen and call the other show with Matt. Yeah, so thank you guys for what you
Eric
guys do.
is swooning that you remembered the name of our show and not
Atheist Experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, he's right over here
he's
swooning.
Right over there swooning. I can see him. So what did you want to...
I wanted to just get, like, I'm Nigerian, and I missed what Noah was saying about Nigerian, so...
I wasn't saying anything about Nigerian specifically. I was talking about a TV show out of Nigeria called Vultures of Horror.
Oh.
I do a movie review show called God Awful Movies, where we find really bad religious movies. And I don't know if you're familiar with Vultures of Horror, but it's this it's a Christian themed soap opera out of Nigeria, and it's just awful. So that's
I can tell you straight away that all the Christian movies in Nigeria...
all the Christian movies in the world, man, as it turns out.
Particularly the one in Nigeria is because there's going to be a lot of witchcraft.
Yes.
It's just,
people turning into skeletons all of a sudden,
Yeah, they do that.
Exactly. So I described myself as a theist on the way out.
Yeah, it says that.
Yeah, and Jamie, you guys are doing a good work. I know I've said that a ton of times. But I wanted to get your understanding. When we talk about creationism and we talk about the creation of the world, what bothers you about, let's say, for example, when you have to explain the Big Bang to someone? How would you explain the Big Bang to me? So I grew up as a Christian where we are being taught about the whole Adam and Eve story. And
sorry to hear that.
For me, a lot of questions started coming up. But then when you present the Big Bang, I wanted to understand what is that? Like, I have an idea, but how does that explain?
So here's what I will say. In my mind, the Big Bang is complicated and difficult to understand. I don't have a sufficient understanding to teach even a single lesson in a science class on it. My basic understanding, very, very sort of basic, very, very basic, loose, probably not quite physics terms, is that matter and energy, the way that they function currently, was all in a very small space, and because the matter and energy that we think of as existing today existed in a different form, it's a thing that physicists and cosmologists describe as nothing, right? Like, so no atoms or quarks or whatever, or actually I think there were quarks, but they hadn't formed yet, something along these lines, and then a rapid expansion of those things resulted in them changing. But mostly what I would say is, if you're curious to learn more about this, ask someone that knows.
Right.
And which is what you're trying to do, and it's good.
Went over my head like...
I mean, to be quite honest, it goes over mine as well. And I'm 6 foot.
So where I'm getting to is, can we say that is it okay to classify it as being mysterious? Like, so if you say, with all the explanations that you have given, why did all these things have to come up? Why? What is the essence of the whole thing? Because
so
one of the things that our pastors and our bishops and our reverend is that it was God that was behind it, engineering all of these things. How do you explain the fact that does it worry you? Is it kind of mysterious to you, or how would you say?
Okay, well, so I would say it's definitely mysterious to me. It's one of the most, we're talking about like the nanosecond after time and space began. So yes, it's crazy mysterious. And with the same caveat that Jamie gave you, that neither of us are astrophysicists, we're not remotely qualified to talk about Big Bang cosmology in detail. There's a difference, though, between, I'm sorry, you asked if it was mysterious, and then you asked another, was it mysterious, and was it something else? And I can't recall exactly what you asked.
Yeah, it all comes down to being mysterious. Like, does it bother you? Does it worry you that...
No, I certainly wouldn't say it bothers me or worries me that it's mysterious. I'm actually excited by the fact that it's mysterious. The coolest parts of science are the parts where there's still some mystery. Where we're still digging in and uncovering new knowledge, where there's still new knowledge to be had. That being said, it doesn't bother me in the sense that that my worldview might be in trouble by it, or that I have less confidence in my worldview because of it, because my worldview is not necessarily based on Big Bang cosmology, right? So far, the Big Bang is the best theory that we have to explain the existence of matter, the existence of time, the nature of matter, etc. But that's it, right? Like, it is simply the best theory that we have. And it's given the enormous amount of evidence that we have, the enormous number of predictions that Big Bang cosmology made that were later proven true or were able to be tested out, gives us a high degree of confidence in it. That doesn't mean we understand every last piece of it, right? But it's like that for most things, right? Like I know most of how my refrigerator works, right? But there are parts of it that are mysterious to me. That doesn't make it, like, I don't worry whether my refrigerator is going to work because parts of how it works are mysterious.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to get that. And then, so I see a lot of time, I know I've watched it, Matt discuss slavery, and you guys have also made comments about slavery. Now, you guys don't subscribe to the Bible, and I understand the reason why. How would you explain slavery? How would you explain what happened then? Because would you say that was part of our evolutionary process? How would you explain slavery?
So here's what I will say. As far as part of our biological evolutionary process, no, because biology doesn't explain or relate directly to sociology or the history of human interactions. What I would say is, particularly if you're talking about European colonization, there were groups of cultures that developed in Europe, discovered other parts of the world, developed ships and a desire for industry and to harness the raw materials from around the world, and decided to enslave other humans that they viewed as different or other. And the very sort of stark, difference in appearance probably better enabled them to behave in an inhumane way and enslave other people in a very sickening and disturbing way. But no, I would say it's a terrible thing that happened, right? But I don't think that it was necessary or good at any point, if that's sort of your question. I mean, I also don't see how the Bible or God explains that at all, right? Like, in my mind, if you...
Okay. Sorry, the idea I was bringing out is that if the assumption is that the Bible is false, then it simply means that slavery is what we human beings did to each other. Is that a better way to explain it?
I'm sorry, would it be different if the Bible is true? Wouldn't it still just be a cruel thing that we did to each other? I'm just trying to clarify your point.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, because the way that there's, I think Matt would say that means God is a moral talk. So,
well,
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think I was just trying to understand, because now I'm getting to a point where in my life that I can no longer hold on to the crap that I've believed in growing up as a child.
Good for you.
My dad is a pastor. I grew up in the church, literally, and I've seen a lot of things. I would tell you that I have prayed for a dead person before, and he did not wake up. And I have prayed for a blind person, and the blind person did not see.
It's interesting how that used to work until we had medical records and photography, right?
Yeah, because you guys did a great job in trying to, because a lot of times I see that they just smuggle all these things into the preaching. Oh, we prayed, 1,000 deaf ears were open, something blind eyes were open, and they say, oh, you can do this, and these signs shall follow they that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. In my name they shall do all these interesting things.
And then it doesn't happen.
I actually took myself to a place where there was a dead person. We were actually told to go and console the family. And I told the other pastor, I'm like, you know what? The Bible said we can raise the dead. Why don't we just pray and raise the dead and do some?
Because in the end, you only pray for things that can happen.
Right.
Oh, we were there for 2 hours,
Yeah.
And I did not stop at that point because I felt like maybe something was wrong with me. I didn't fast enough, or maybe I did something bad the previous day, and maybe God's.
You blame yourself rather than the truth value of.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the same thing, I summoned up faith again, prayed for a blind person. Same thing happened. The deaf person.
Yeah.
And it began to poke hole into what I have grown up to believe, and I feel like it's all a lie, and I'm finding it difficult to really just say it is a lie, because everything is like my whole worldview is literally coming to me.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's very difficult, obviously, when so much of your personality and your life is built on this one thing, to say, hey, you know, maybe this thing is incorrect. But I think you're hitting on a really interesting point, and one that I think is underappreciated by a lot of people who are still in religion, which is, you know, you said, I prayed for this person, and the prayer didn't have the effect that I thought it was going to have. So I immediately assumed, right, like most Christians would, that I had prayed incorrectly, or that I was not worthy of this, or what have you. And interestingly enough, when you see right, like when you look up a fun science experiment on YouTube or whatever, right? They won't say, and then you pour the vinegar on the baking soda, but you have to really believe, you know, or something like that, or, you know, but if you've been sinful, you know, so yeah, and that's a way that I think religion insulates itself against empirical testing.
Yeah, if it didn't, it wouldn't be around.
Yeah.
And so what I will say is, indoctrination from a young age, which is being told, no, here are the answers, don't think about them, right? And the second part often goes unsaid when you're in a particularly religious community. It's a disservice that was done to you. I'm going to be a little bit more blunt than I usually am today. I don't know why, but I'm going to do it.
I have that effect on people.
It's a disservice that was done to you by your parents and your community. And to be quite honest, I don't blame them, because it was done to them as well. And it's been passed on from generation to generation, actually, from those same European colonizers
now that you
before.
Mention it.
But in the same way that a member of a cult cannot psychologically understand what it is to leave. I don't know how familiar you are with what happens to a person's mind when they're in a cult, or how difficult it is for them to leave. In the same way that an alcoholic even though they will know and want to stop drinking, is compelled from actually chemical things in their brain to not stop drinking. It's not entirely chemical. It's kind of a, the negative version of therapy done to children when minds are still forming that affects the ability of a human being to reason, right? Like if you were trying to decide, oh, should I buy, I don't know, one fruit or the other fruit, right, at a market or wherever, or you're trying to decide what to do with your money, you're trying to make a decision, you think about it and you'd go, oh, okay, well, here are the pros and cons of option A, and here are the pros and cons of option B, and there's no real part of your brain that's dictating to you that you can't think about it, and that those human processes that you use to make reasonable decisions, you can't use, oh, don't think about it, don't use your mind. But those things exist when it comes to religion because of that indoctrination. And it's...
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because there's a point you pray, and the idea is when you pray, it's going to get answered. And when it's not answered, and they tell you, oh, pray until something happens, or maybe you don't need it at the moment, or
it wasn't part of God's plan, and
that he sometimes changes, but sometimes doesn't. It's indistinguishable from, right? Like, so the phrase, pray until something happens, you can replace it with, sit in your house until something happens.
Wait until something happens. Yeah,
until
exactly.
something happens. So
wait, don't you?
So
there was something I think Eric said on the show, and it struck me, and that was some of the things that really helped me. He said something about prayer happens at the rate of chance. Like, what is the chance that it's going to happen anyways, and what is the chance that it's not going to happen? And I begin to evaluate a lot of things that I have prayed for in my life, and I see that at the end of the day, it's actually me getting things done. It is me providing food on my table. It is me protecting my family. It is me getting everything done.
Right.
Because God sits down there and allows a little girl to be raped, and then a stupid pastor explains to me that God does not interfere with free will.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so God decides to honor the free will of the person raping and ignore the free will of the person being raped.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please. No, please.
Well, I just, people are, religious people are fond of, the first apologetic most of us hear is God works in mysterious ways. And I've always taken issue with that. It's like, I can predict exactly the way that God's going to work, right? Like God's going to work exactly at the same rate of random chance every time. If I pray over a dice, God's going to give me a 6, 1/6 of the time,
If I drop these sunglasses, God is going to work like gravity.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. Nice, as mysterious as he is, he's never going to make them fall up.
Yeah, as mysterious as he is, when we measure the universe under a microscope, he acts the same way every time.
Yeah, exactly.
But
oh my God, like it's I'm sorry, I'm all around, because it's like I'm evaluating all this information, and for a very long time, I was in a meeting, like a church meeting, and we're talking about the problem of evil, and basically the evil things that happened in the Old Testament, like the war, God giving people instructions to kill people. And a pastor that I so much respected told us that, well, all this evil that happened in the Old Testament was not God giving instructions that it was not he was literally saying it was not God ordering it. And I'm like, these are prophets of God.
Yeah.
These are people acting in the name of God. So how do you differentiate these people from God? And I saw a careful way of the pastor trying to separate those acts of evil
From God.
From God, because it came from the premises that God is good and in him there is no evil. Then I look at the scripture that says that when God himself says, I am good and I'm evil, I create light, I create darkness, I'm like, what am I supposed to believe now? If he is telling me that he is both good and evil, and I cannot wrap my head around the fact that God is evil, because if God is good, then where did evil come from? And the problem of evil,
if a God
like talking
existed.
about the slave trade, talking about all these crazy things that are happening in the scriptures, you know, even talking about creation itself.
Yeah.
He created man and he put him in the Garden of Eden, and he told him, why
according to the story. So
according to the story, like, you know, like, why did you put the tree there? And how did it get
right. So here's the thing, is sort of like the apologetics that are done for these stories can be done for any story, right? I'm sure, given enough time and given enough extra teachings, someone somewhere can come up with, I don't know, actually Voldemort in the stories isn't the villain. That's a misinterpretation.
Right.
He was trying to say blah, 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 right? And they can do that because if you're allowed to make up whatever you want, you can make up an ending of the story that you want. And as long as you don't look too closely at the text or think about it too critically, you can believe. And so what I will say is that's what happens with stories that aren't true. Do you think that the stories in the Bible are true? Like, do you think there was a literal Garden of Eden?
Which is the question I wanted to ask you guys. Would you say, because one of the things that is constantly pushed out is that the Bible is an historical book that has been there for a very long time. How do you classify the Bible? How do you classify it? Do you classify it as entirely false, or how exactly do you? Is it actually an historical book, or what is it?
So I don't find the text of the Bible particularly reliable for the recording historical events, right? So there's parts, for example, in the New Testament where they're talking about why Jesus of Nazareth was technically born in Bethlehem, right? I mean, the real reason is they needed their Savior to be born in Bethlehem in order to fulfill prophecy. And in the Testament, it says, oh, there was a census taken when whatever was governor of, I forget the place, and so was the emperor of Rome, right? Which is the equivalent of saying when George Bush was governor of Texas and Obama was president. These things didn't happen at the same time. And also, there was no census, and we know that.
Also, the census isn't even logically possible. The whole go to the town of your fathers. Like, where would you go?
Why would you do that? Why would you not take a census of where they are now? As opposed to and then also it's like, so your father was born in a different town, so you're going to go where your father was, and your father's going to go where his father was. It doesn't make sense. And as long as you don't think about it and don't look at it, you can just sort of like pretend, oh yeah, no, that's true. And as long as you don't think about it, sure. Like, it's logically possible for people to walk around. It doesn't make any sense at all. And at the point at which stories literally do not make any sense at all, I don't believe they're true, right? I do not believe the legend of Jack and the Beanstalk, where overnight a giant beanstalk grew and he was able to climb into the clouds, which is a world of giants, right? Absolutely no part of that is feasible to believe. And I don't for that reason. And when there's historical events, accounted that, it's possible for people to be owned as slaves. It's possible for an entire nation of people to be owned as slaves. When archaeologists from Israel went to Egypt to look for evidence of a large population of Jewish slaves in Egypt at any point in time, they concluded, no, Jews were never en masse slaves in Egypt. And so when you ask me, do I think that the Bible is a historical book? No.
I mean, in the sense that it's been there since, way early.
It's really old.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been translated a bunch of times, right? Like in the same way that, sure, do I think that the Iliad and the Odyssey, right, like legends about, the Trojan Wars or whatever, are historical books? No, I think that a couple of Greek states got into a large war is reasonable. However, there was a guy and he was mostly invincible except for his ankle, and they were fighting over, spoils of war, and that's why the Greek gods got involved. At the point where you've got invincible people that can only be killed with their ankle because a mythical river underground that we also know doesn't exist was used by his mother, who's a god that we also know doesn't exist. At that point, I'm just sort of like, okay, there was a war, and then you decided to add a bunch of fairy tales. Cool. I don't mean to besmirch people's grandfathers, but it's sort of like, yeah, grandfather, I believe you fought in World War II. No, I don't believe you punched Hitler in the face personally, right? Like, there's a certain level of like, oh, okay, so-and-so stole an apple from so-and-so. That's a reasonable story. So-and-so flew in with, winged shoes and flew in and did all these sort of magical things. There's no reason for me to believe that that's true. So while there are Christians that will go, oh, no, look, Jerusalem was there, and look, this city got destroyed, and that happens, right? It's sort of like, it's an example that's used on the show before. There's this superhero story, Spider-Man, and in the story, he lives in New York City. New York City exists, Spider-Man doesn't. So when you ask me, is the Bible a historical book? No. It it tells stories that supposedly happened in history, but I have no reason to believe that it's accurate whatsoever.
So is it, because, I'm listening to all you're saying, and I'm trying to figure out how this book has come to be something that is popularly held.
Well, you've got to keep in mind when we're talking about the evolution of the Bible and how it became popular in the day, that for a very, very long time in the history of the Catholic Church, it was forbidden for Christians to read the Bible. Right? The Bible was in Latin. The common people didn't speak Latin. When Martin Luther decided to translate it into common English, there was there was wars, and there were deaths, and there was massacres and everything. And this was a huge, huge deal. People were very, very upset about this idea. Now, some people thought it was a great idea, some people didn't. But for a very large portion, especially of Christian history, the Bible was a mystery to the people who were supposed to believe in it, right? And the authorities didn't want them to look into it, right? So when you try to ask yourself, because there are parts of it that are nonsensical, like literally nonsensical, and directly contradictory. So when you ask how the Bible got to where it is, one of the things that you kind of have to keep in mind is that it got where it was without anyone, or without the common believers even knowing what was in it, right? So we can't really look to what was in it to find out why it gained the popularity that it did, or gained the sway that it did. It was just a really thick book full of.
Eric.
Oh, sorry.
Eric, why? I know I'm asking a lot of
So I think I understand what you're saying is why would it?
Why did I believe it? Like, why am I just?
You were told as a child it was true.
Finding out that
you were told as a child it was true, and most people, when they're told things like that don't result in either their death or their maiming, and they're told things that are false as a child, they continue to believe them, right? And
now I'm reading,
because we are hardwired evolutionarily to believe our parents, because it's more advantageous to listen to the older people that tell you, no, don't go play with the giant kitty cat, it's going to eat you, when you're a child and can get eaten by a lion, right? And that trust and that being told, no, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, that's something that affects how a person forms beliefs. And that is why I think you personally believe that. If you're asking how could a story that was false be believed and then be believed by the next generation and the next generation and the next generation,
yeah, exactly.
The answer is the same.
Exactly.
Because they were told as children. And
Well, and
because
also by-
and because even if you're an adult, it's really, really easy to believe things that are false. It's easier than believing complicated things that are true.
Right, yes. The Big Bang is way, way, way harder to get your head around than let there be light.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, there wasn't light, and then there was. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah. You're right on that.
Yeah, that and
you know, with what you just said now, I am really afraid for my child because now I'm seeing things in a different light, and I have this little boy growing up, and every day of his life we've been taken into church. Not that I find any value in it anymore, but so he's gonna grow up to believe all this crap too, because I don't even know how to tell my wife.
Oh wow!
Like,
yeah,
I cannot. It is it is our whole life.
And to be quite honest, that's part of why the belief is so pervasive, because it's very possible, even with one or two non-believers that feel like they can't speak out, that the belief continues to exist. And yeah, like the issues like this of like, well, I don't really believe, like marriages between a person that believes vehemently and prays for rain every day and a person who's sort of like, well, it doesn't matter. They only really run into like, I can't ignore this type problems when there are children, because children cannot form thoughts independently to the same degree that adults can, right? And so parents have to guide their children in their thinking. There's all kinds of...
He's already shouting hallelujah now, and I'm looking at him and I shake my head. I'm like, oh my God.
How old is he?
Hallelujah. Gonna be 2. I think 22.
Oh, okay. So here's what I will say.
22 months. I'm sorry. 22 months.
Okay.
In 2 months. And the thing that I have, because I know that most likely you will tell me, is there any value in telling her or something? I feel like I hold a duty. The same way that I stood up in the bus in Nigeria to preach to people, I would have evangelized to nothing less than 1,000 people in my lifetime. Going around preaching, going into the forest, like, taking this gospel everywhere. And I feel like because in a place like Nigeria, and I honestly wish you guys can maybe do something, and I'm going to think about something, because we are just sitting below these guys and eating up all this crap, and I feel like I cannot continue to do this. I go to church every day. I lead worship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yes, that is how difficult. So I cannot even escape from church until I take a huge stand and say no more. Well, that is the position where I've found myself in now.
Yeah, that's rough. And now I want to offer up one piece of advice that may be useful and may not be. Obviously, with a child that young, they're not going to be able to understand the nuances of the religion anyway. But one thing I would suggest, if you want to plant that seed of doubt with your son without having a confrontation with your wife, or without, because obviously if she wants to raise him one way and you want to raise him the other way, that's going to lead to a huge amount of conflict. But one of the ways that you can do that is very early on, introduce him to other religious beliefs. Now, I'm not saying necessarily take him to other churches, take him to other religious services or whatever, but let him know what other religions believe as well. And then he'll automatically have in his head, like, wow, the religions all believe different stuff, but the science all believes the same stuff, and that might be enough to provide that seed of doubt, as Matt Dillahunty's fond of saying. I believe it was Matt that coined it, but you introduce a kid to one religion, you've indoctrinated them. You'll introduce them to multiple religions, and you've inoculated them.
Yeah, like I would say that, and then I would also point out things that you know, the use of science has provided, right? Like, oh, well, you know, church is fun. You know, this is the one that we go to. Some people are Muslims, some people are Hindus, that sort of thing as well. Also, different denominations of Christian where that matters more. But also, hey, look, you know, there's a car that wasn't prayed into existence, right? Like, like it wasn't, and it took human beings understanding things. But I think the most important thing, right, because it's very, very difficult, I understand that it's very, very difficult in your situation to say, yeah, I don't believe any of this crap. You don't, and that's good. You're free mentally, but not necessarily socially. What I will say is, yeah, I mean, we're coming up on the end of the show, and we kind of have to boogie here a little bit. Okay. But what I will say is, if you encourage him to think and question and learn, and you introduce him to the idea that there are multiple religions, you've done him a service that I'm willing to bet your father didn't do for you.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And I think the last thing I wanted to ask, is it okay for me to, like, share your videos on pages and all of that? Or do I have to get, like, your YouTube videos, is it okay to share it and on, like, your website or something?
Please do.
Yeah, we would
share it everywhere.
Certainly appreciate
Post it everywhere. Play it with a projector on the side of a large building. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I honestly, if I was
also like and
Nigeria,
subscribe.
I would definitely do that, because you guys are doing a great job. Like, you have no idea what you help us to think. You help us to ask questions that we would not ask before, and the questions that you ask theists, people like me, have helped me to come to begin to question a lot of things, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you very much. I don't want to hold you any further. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you so much for calling, man.
Thank you for calling in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go without God.